Good morning, Moray Rabotai. We are continuing on Masechet Berachot, and we are holding on Daf Lamed Vav Amud Aleph by the two dots towards the top of the Amud. The Limud of Amud Yomi for Chodesh Cheshvan has been sponsored by Shahab and Shenaz Rabbi for health, prosperity of their entire family, and should have nachat from all their children to grow in Torah. And also has been sponsored by the Hami family, the Ilu Nishmat Yosef ben Alegna Simcha bat Rachel, and Aliza Talia Sarabat, Hanoch Feivel, that the Neshamot should have an Adiyam. Amen. The sponsorship of the entire learnings of Amud Yomi and other learnings of the month of Cheshvan has not yet been sponsored, still open for sponsorship if someone wants to take that. And we go on what we do. This is a very interesting, but at the same time, the bottom of this Amud is a little bit complex, not because it's a difficult Amud, but because it brings in certain Shas concepts that you need to know when you go through Gemarot, and the Gemara just rattles them off using those concepts as though we know them, which we should really. If you learn Mishnayot, and you know Mishnayot well as a 10-year-old, which was supposed to be the case, that by the time you start learning Gemara, you already know the entire Mishnayot by heart, then Itaka would be actually very easy, but many of us may not have really delved into those concepts. So as we visit those concepts, I will pause and explain those, and you'll pay attention because these are things that you will need, not just for this page in the Gemara, but you'll need them as general concepts in the Jewish life and going through the Gemarot later on as well. So we can't really stop a whole lot, otherwise we'd stay a whole week on this Amud, but we do what we do, which is do the main things and try to keep the pace moving. So Kimcha Dechiti, what is the bracha we discussed, or you discussed before, the bracha on Shemen Zayit? What's the bracha on olive oil? Right? That we discussed already. Now, what is the bracha on kemahitim, on flour, wheat flour? And the Gemara says, Kimcha dechiti Rav Yehuda Amar Borei Pri Adama, Rav Nachman Amar Shakol Niya Bidbaro. It's machloket if it's hadama or shakol. Now, many Rishonim say that this is not talking about a regular wheat flour, because regular wheat flour nobody eats. And if nobody eats something and you start eating it just for practice, you don't make even a bracha on it. Who eats wheat flour? So therefore, some want to suggest that this is talking about when you, prior to grinding the wheat, you put them in the tanur, you roasted them somewhat, and now when you grind the wheat, it actually has some taste, and it's good to go. Others say, no, it's talking about, these are Tosafot. Others say, that it's talking about when you didn't grind them completely, you still have small pieces of wheat itself, so you chew on it, it still has a taste of wheat, but flour, perhaps you wouldn't say bracha on it. And then you have the other Rishonim that they say by wheat flour itself also, there is a machloket. But this is important because as we go through the parak of brachot, you will see that there are different levels. We're going to have it today as well, of if something is not planted for a certain purpose, but it's edible, right? We're going to have hearts of palm coming up right now. What bracha do you make on hearts of palm? My chavruta's father wrote a sefer. He's one of the main poskim in Mexico City, and Rabbi Peretz and Michal Peretz. His son told me that he gave me actually a sefer of his father on brachot, and in there it says that it depends where they're produced, hearts of palm. In South America is one way, in America itself is a different way. It depends why they are planting the hearts of palm. If they're planting it in order to produce hearts of palm is one way. If they're planting it for other reasons and it's a side product, it's a different thing, which we're going to see today. So that is the kavanah of why something is planted. It actually has to do with the bracha that you make on it, as we're going to see. So it's important to have the different levels in mind as we go through the halachot of brachot. So says the Gemara, Kimka Dachiti is a machloket between Rav Yehuda, who says it's Borei Priyadama, and Rav Nachman, who says Shakol Niya Bidvaro. Amar le Rav Nachman. Rava told Rav Nachman, who holds his Shakol, Lo tifrog alet Rabbi Yehuda. Do not disagree with Rabbi Yehuda. Because Rav Yehuda, who says it's Hadama, is supported by Rabbi Yohanan and Shmuel. The Rabbi Yohanan and Shmuel, Kaimi Kevate. They hold like Rav Yehuda, who holds it is Borei Priyadama. Now, let's visit that support. The Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, because Rav Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel, Vecher Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yitzchak says it in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Shemen Zayit, Mevarchin Alav Borei Peri Ha'etz. So this is where you see that Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan hold like Rabbi Yehuda, because a very comparable sugya is the halakha that we just had yesterday. That Shemen Zayit, you say what bracha on it? What? Borei Peri Ha'etz instead of Shakol Niya Bidvaro. So you see that even though that it has changed, it's no longer a pre-ha'etz, so to speak. It's not a pre-ha'etz. You still say Borei Peri Ha'etz on it, not Shakol, right? So that's the suggestion of the Gemara. Alma. So you see, Afal Gav the Ishtani, even though that it has changed, B'milteh Kai, it has still contained its own bracha. Hachanami, and therefore you could infer from there that here also in our case of kimcha dechiti, of wheat flour, even though that it's not like wheat anymore, it doesn't look like it, it has changed. Right? So here's the suggestion of the Gemara that Rava is telling Rav Nachman, how dare you disagree with Rav Yehuda? Rabbi Yochanan and Shmuel are supporting him. Where do you see Rabbi Yochanan and Shmuel talk about wheat flour? You don't. But they spoke about what? Olive oil. And then there you see, if it's changed still, it maintains its bracha. So we should infer that they would say the same thing by here. Gemara says, absolutely not. What kind of comparison is that? Rabotai, what's the difference? The simple, obvious difference.
Process. Wheat flour becomes processed.
Liquid, processed, solid. The Gemara says the ultimate difference. The ultimate difference is when you have olive oil, is there anything on top of olive oil? Are you going to change it to anything else, or is it the final product? It's final product. That is what you want when you plant an olive tree. When you plant an olive, has anyone tried eating an olive?
Yeah, I tried. It's
Not even doable. Forget about fun. We had a thing for pressing olive oil by Hanukkah for kids, and we should do it this year maybe. And once we had these massive olives, I want to try to see what because Gemara talks about this, and it's just not doable. The main product of an olive tree is olive oil. Nowadays we process the olives, we have olives, and so on and so forth. But after olive oil, there's nothing on top of it. But when you ground up the flour and you have it now, are you going to eat that? No, it's not the final product. You're going to make bread, cookies, cakes. That's what you're going to do from it. This is an interim stage. Interim stage that's never meant to be used by itself. So if you eat it in an interim stage, of course you don't make the same bracha of Borei Peri Ha'adama, because it's not what it's supposed to be. Says the Gemara. Midami. So is it even comparable? Hatam, there by olive oil. Letle iluya acharina. It doesn't have any other elevation after this. It's the top product. It is the final product. Hacham, here by our case, itle iluya acharina. It does have another stage, and this is an interim that's not even meant to be used, and it's meant to be bepat, made to bread. Says the Gemara, you want to suggest, now the Gemara attacks this. The Gemara says, you want to suggest that if he has another stage afterwards, you don't make a bracha on it. You don't make a borei peri adama. Ela shakol. You want to suggest that if it can be made better, then you don't make borei peri adama. You only make shakol. Amar Shmuel. Don't we know in the name of Shmuel that Akara Chayam Vekim Chadasari, that zucchini, basically a raw pumpkin, a zucchini, and Kim Chadasari, and the Kemach Seorim, which means a flour from barley, Mevarchin Alayhu Shakol Niya Bidvaro. We make Shakol Niya Bidvaro on them. Now, before I go on, I want to suggest something, not suggest, but I want to explain something that's important. In the time of Gemara, barley and wheat were viewed very differently. Nowadays, okay, you have barley. Barley actually is very popular. People have it for many different reasons. But back in the time of the Gemara, barley was considered a very low-level food. It was machal be'ema. It was considered just animal food. And I'm not sure if our local gastroenterologist is not here to ask him, but the Gemara says that it has causes problems for the stomach and so on and so forth. It could create worms and whatnot, which again depends on what they had back then and how it was processed and so on. But nevertheless, the Gemara looks at barley flour much lower than wheat flour. So therefore, the Gemara now wants to say, you see that barley flour is shakol. That by itself indicates that wheat flour is borei pri adama. Because if wheat flour also was shakol, we should have said wheat flour is shakol. That would be the chidush. From the fact that this Gemara chose to say on pumpkin and raw pumpkin and on barley flour, you say shakol. From here, you see that the wheat flour is a higher level, and it is what? Borei pri adama. We just finished saying that wheat flour always is shakol because it has changed and it's not a final product. It's an interim product, right? And anything that's interim product, it is not its own bracha, so it won't be borei pri adama. So the Gemara now is bringing this memra that in the name of Shmuel that by barley flour is shakol, which seems to indicate that wheat flour, which is a higher level, a better food, it would be adama. And there you have an interim product, and more specifically, our discussion of interim product of wheat flour that would be hadama. That's the suggestion of the Gemara. Now, you have a question in your minds that I see in your eyes you want to ask. The Gemara is going to ask that question and is going to reject that question in a moment. Says the Gemara, my love the chiti borei pri adama. Isn't that suggesting that the wheat from the wheat flour should be hadama? Says the Gemara, no. The chiti nami shakol niya bidvaro. Even the flour from wheat is going to be still shakol. There is absolutely no difference between wheat flour and barley flour, period. So the Gemara says, wait a second. If that's correct, if that's correct, why doesn't the Gemara choose to say wheat flour, you say shakol, and then we will know for sure that barley flour will be shakol? Give me the bigger chidush. The bigger chidush would be that even wheat flour, which is good, still is shakol, and you don't say hadama because it's interim period before it becomes bread. Why don't you give me the bigger chidush? Right? Says the Gemara, no. Because if the Gemara would teach me chitim, would teach me that on wheat flour you make borei peri, shakol niya bidvaro, not borei peri adama, then hava amina, then I would have said hanemili dechiti. Aval desari lo livrich aleh klal. First wide line. I would have thought that when you tell me that wheat flour is shahakol nihya bidvaro, that's only by wheat flour. You at least make a bracha on it. What bracha shahakol nihya bidvaro? But kemach seorim, barley flour, you don't even make a bracha altogether. No bracha. You want to eat barley flour? No bracha. I would have thought that that's what you mean. Now the Gemara really has problems with this. Kamash malan. So therefore, meaning before we attack it, the Gemara says that's why the Gemara has told us that you make a shahakol nihya bitvaro on barley flour. Is not coming to indicate that you make borei peri adama on wheat because wheat is better. No, both of them are shahakol. And if you want to ask why we don't mention wheat flour, and then I would know myself that barley is going to be also shahakol, because if you would tell me wheat flour, you make shahakol nihya bidvaro, I would have thought, the listener, would have thought that you mean only wheat flour, you at least make a shahakol on it, and barley flour, you don't even make a bracha. Now, why in the world would you think that you don't make any bracha on barley flour? We make a bracha on everything. We make a bracha pretty much on everything. You want to have salt, you want to have salt water, anything is food. Why in the world would you imagine that you are going to eat something and you're not going to even need to say bracha on it? Why would that come to your mind?
Maybe if it's not edible or.
Well, it's edible. It's not gishmak. It's not better. Is it worse than salt? Right? That's what's going to be the Gemara's question. The Gemara says, how in the world are you going to think that you're going to eat something and you're not going to even need to say bracha on it? That's going to be the question of the Gemara. Says the Gemara, first wide line in the middle. Umi gara mimelach vezamit. Is it worse than salt and brine? Ditnan, should be the Tanya, that we learned the Braita, al hamelach val hazamit, on salt and on brine, omer shakol niya bidvaro. Even on them, if you decide to put them in your mouth and have some salty stuff, then you say shakol on it. So you're going to think that the barley flour is going to be worse than that? Says the Gemara, istrich. No, it's needed. Because there would be a legitimate thought crossing your mind that barley flour should be worse than even salt. And therefore, the Gemara needs to come and say that it is not, and you still make shahakol on barley flour. What would have been the thought that would cross your mind if I didn't say it? Says the Gemara, Salka datach amina, because I would have thought melach v'zamit avid inshi deshadi lepumen. Salt and brine, sometimes a person decides to taste them, right? Aval kim chadasari, but barley flour, ho'il v'kashe lekuka'aini, because it is hard for kukiani, which is stomach problems and intestine problems, right? With worms, whatever else may be. People would stay away from them, especially if it's not baked. It doesn't kill the eggs of the worms, whatever else may be. I'm not sure exactly the science of this, how it worked. You sometimes have, the people who keep yashan, they have this problem sometimes. The barley, especially the oats and barley, they're infested. You keep yashan, of course, and we had this problem when we used to store things. Now we came up with a whole different system. One time I remember we had the quicker oats, and we opened the nice fancy ones, and we opened it, and it was like probably about 50,000.
Oh my God!
Yeah, small cockroaches, like the black bugs, running all over the place, right?
Visible to the eye.
So yeah, of course, yeah, they had like a whole nursery there. It's unbelievable. So yeah, so this was brand new, sealed, and it's from a very upstanding thing, and it wasn't even that old. So what happened exactly? What happened was there are eggs of this inside of it. It's not that they penetrate from outside. You just leave them in a warm and nice and dark place. They start, once they hatch and the food is right there, then it's mamash gan eden, me'en olam haba. They eat and reproduce the whole day, and after one, you leave them for 2 months, you'll have an entire town of bugs inside this box, which is what exactly we had. We had a video of it some time ago. I'm not sure what happened to it, but this is like a fascinating. So the way to do it is you deep freeze it for 2 days, 3 days. It kills the bugs, and that's it. Get the eggs, and they will never hatch. If you refrigerate them, it just puts them on hold. It doesn't kill the eggs. But back in the day, who had a deep freezer or any of those things? So people had to be careful with what they ate. If there was more potential for these types of things, they didn't want it to even happen in their food. So therefore, says the Gemara, no one is going to, in a regular scenario, I would have thought that because no one chooses to eat kemach seorim, if you want to choose to do it, maybe you shouldn't even say bracha. Therefore, the Braita needed to teach me that even in that case, if you choose to eat barley flour, you still make shahakol. You're not going to eat it without the bracha. Okay? So that's the Gemara. 2 dots, 3, 4 lines down. Korah, now this is what we translate as hearts of palm, which is based on the Rambam. Rambam in Pirush Mishnayot says Korah is hearts of palm, which is the stem, the top of the stem of the tree, of palm tree, is very soft, and writes Rambam, it's white like hard cheese. So he writes, right? Which is hearts of palm. It's pretty clear that that's what he's referring to. Rashi here says no, it's the branches, the new sprouts and shoots of palm every year. They're so soft that you can eat them, and they're yummy and they're good. So in the first few months that they're soft and they haven't grown to become etz, they haven't grown to become wood, that's what is called korah. So it's the palm shoots, basically, right? When they're really, really fresh every year. Fine? Says the Gemara, korah, this hearts of palm, let's call it hearts of palm for our purposes. Rav Yehuda amar bore pri adama, v'Shmuel amar shakol niya bidvaro. So you see, this is becoming very now relevant. It's the same thing that I told you. Har Peretz writes in his sefer, depending on where your hearts of palm comes from, that's going to be the bracha, either shakol or adama, right? So first of all, you have to ask the obvious question. What's the obvious question? That's the obvious question, right? Tosfot Arid, Rabbeinu Yeshaya the Terani HaRishon, one of the great names in the Rishonim, he asks the Ran's question. He says, wait a second, why not ha'etz? So once he asked it, I was going to speak about it in 2 minutes, but once he asked it, let's discuss it. Why not put it pri ha'etz? Because what is the korah? The korah is the etz. The korah is what later is going to become the tree itself, the etz, the wood itself. And to say bore pri ha'etz, it would be incorrect, because not bore pri ha'etz, it is the etz. It just happens to be that you caught it early on when it's gishmak and edible and soft and yummy. So you want to make a bracha on it because you're eating it. But what are you eating? You're essentially eating the etz. You can't say bore ha'etz. So, but you say bore pri ha'adama is correct, because this is an outcome of adama, of the ground. It certainly is the fruit, which is the product of the ground. But it's not the product of the etz, it is the etz. Product is something that the etz produces. This is not a product of the etz, it's the product of the ground. So it is a more proper language of saying bracha. We will revisit this concept later on, when you will realize that on certain other things also we make bore pri ha'adama, where you would have thought that there should be bore pri ha'etz. We'll come back to it, okay? But for now, it's a good question, it's a good answer, and we move on. Says the Gemara. There's a machloket. This is a very interesting machloket, by the way. You know why? Because this is one of the rare places that Rav Yehuda is disagreeing with his Rebbe. Remember, Rav Yehuda is one of the geniuses of the Gemara, old-time geniuses, that Shmuel, as we're going to see right now, Shmuel used to always call him Shinina, the sharp one, right? He learned first by Rav and Shmuel. Rav lived a very, very long life, unusually long life. The Gemara says that Rav was mishpachat brim. He was a very healthy genetics, and he lived a very healthy and extremely, extremely unusually long life. So he was much older than Shmuel, but he passed away before Shmuel. And then Rav Yehuda moved from being a disciple of Rav to becoming a disciple of Shmuel, right? And Shmuel was always very impressed by him, right? Momentarily, you'll see that he's going to call him again Shinina, the sharp one. But he goes as far as saying, it's the biggest comment that he makes about anybody in Shas Shmuel, even though the Shmuel himself was the top of the line, is in Masechet Nida, on Daf Yud Gimel on page 13, there the Gemara says, Shmuel called him En ze Yelud Isha. This is not a human being. Referring to Rav Yehuda, says this is not a normal, this is not a human, malach, right? So that's Rav Yehuda, and here is one of the rare places that he actually is taking his Rebbe on, and he's disagreeing in halacha with Shmuel, right? So what is the bracha and hearts upon? Rav Yehuda, the Talmud, the student, says, Borei pri adama, because it's fruit. Shmuel amar, shakol niya bidvaro. Shmuel says, no, hearts upon, shakol niya bidvaro. What's the crux of the machloket? What's the logic behind this this debate? Rav Yehuda Amar Borei Pri Adama. Rav Yehuda says Adama. Why? Perau. It is a fruit. What do you mean? You pay top dollar to go to market and buy hearts of palm. So it is fruit. Now you may go back and forth. It's not the fruit of the etz. It's Adama. Make your mind fine. But it is a fruit. You're eating something that's a product. So it says Shmuel says, no, it's not fruit. Amar shakol niya bidvaro. Why not? How can you argue with Rav Yehuda, by the way? It is a product of the ground. It is something that you choose as fruits. Means not, we think of fruit, we think of apple. Fruit means product. It's a product of the ground. So why can't you just say Borei Pri Adama? It's not like an egg that has nothing to do with the ground. Milk has nothing to do with the ground. So you say shakol on those things. On milk and on meat and on milk. Those are the things that you say shakol. This is from the ground. What burns if you say Borei Pri Adama? So what's the logic of Shmuel? Right? Me and you would say it's mistaber, it's more logical like Rav Yehuda that it should be Borei Pri Adama. So what is the logic of Shmuel? Listen to this. Says the Gemara. Amar shakol niya bidvaro ho'il v'sofo lehakshot, because it's not the final part, it's going to become an etz. This is not going to stay a fruit. Fruit is something that's a product, and it stays as a product, as the product of the tree or the ground. You have tomato. The tomato is going to stay a tomato forever until it rots, right? An apple is an apple is an apple. A cucumber is a cucumber. But here, this is not a fruit. This is etz. You just froze that 2 weeks that's soft, and you cut it off and you eat it because now it's edible. Right? You've seen pandas eat bamboos. It's like, they chew on it, even though that's like a few times or 4 times harder than any wood. They chew on it as if it's just like as hearts of palm, right? And literally, like, they peel it off and it's white actually inside of it. It's gishmak to see them do it if you've seen it. So they eat it because that's the fruit. Now you found an etz that's really etz, but it's edible. You caught it on that period of time that's edible. You call that a fruit? It's not a fruit. It's etz. That's what Shmuel holds. Now listen to this. Shmuel himself is going to praise the logic of his student. You want to know what the Rebbe is, what the teacher is, what the father is, what any educator. Right? A father is an educator. A Rebbe is an educator. We are all educators. You have to always be able to see the good in the student or in the child, right? So even though that here is Torah, they're disagreeing in halacha, and the Torah is not just free. Okay, so just give it. But look at how he does it. Amar le Shmuel Rav Yehuda. Shmuel told Rav Yehuda, Shinena, sharp one, genius. Kevatach mistabra. it's more logical that halakha should be like you. You hear this? Why? Because I found a support for you. In other words, he's trying in his mind to go through cases and find, and he says, I found a support for you, Rabbi Yehuda. The asnon sofo lehakshot, because also tznon, right? You have different types of the family of radish. You have the white one, you have the black ones, you have the regular the red inside white. But the main thing that the Gemara calls tznon, the white ones, longer ones, also becomes very hard after a while. And still we make what bracha on it? Borei pri adama. So I found the support, says Shmuel, for you, my Talmud, Rav Yehuda. Amale. So and we say pri adama on it. Says the Gemara, velohi. The Gemara says, Shmuel, even though that he's tried to support the shita of his Talmud, Rav Yehuda, the comparison that Shmuel brought is incorrect. Why is it incorrect? Because tznon, even though that it hardens after time, nati inshi adata de pugla. People, when you plant radish, what are you thinking when you plant radish? You want to eat the radish. That is the product. But by hearts of palm, when you plant the palm, what do you think? You say, well, I live in California, I have to have a palm. That's what you think. You're not thinking, or if it's if it's going to produce dates. That's the kavanah. You don't plant the palm and say, well, yeah, I'm going to have hearts of palm. That's what the Gemara says is the difference. By radish, you say ha'adama on it because that is the final product and it's the kavanah, the mindset. When you plant it, you want radish. When you plant the palm, you want the palm. You don't want the hearts of palm. That's exactly what we're getting at, right? You remember, I started with this because I want to make it a full circle, that if you have nowadays that they plant these things for hearts of palm as a massive multi-million-dollar business, then the Gemara will tell you also that it's got to be borei pri adama.
What does it matter the intention? The planter's intention?
No, it has to do with the intention of why it was planted. Well, you do know in general, the time of the Gemara, people did not do it because of that. And nowadays, many countries, and now it's becoming more and more because it has grown as a business. 30 years ago, you didn't see as much hearts of palm as you see nowadays. It's become something that people have, and more, it's like supply and demand. So the demand has grown. So many countries now are picking up to do fields, like massive fields, that they have this like small things for hearts of palm, and they cut it off and they plant new ones. And it's a business only primarily focused on hearts of palm. So that, of course, is going to be adama.
Both. What if their intention is both?
So we'll get to that. Yeah, but that's the next sugya, which is very, very interesting. Says Gemara, Dikla lo nat inshi adata dekora. A dekel, a palm tree, people do not plant intending and thinking about the hearts of palm product. The Gemara ends up saying, anytime, any case that people do not plant this for this product, lo mevarchinan aleh, we don't make its bracha on it. So therefore, it comes one level down. It should have been hadama if it was planted for the hearts of palm. Now that it's not planted for hearts of palm, what bracha do you make on it? One level down, obi shakol niya bidvaro. Now the Gemara asks the question, which is going to segue into the entire discussion tomorrow. We know there's caper bush that has 4 different products that are edible. It's the evionot is the actual fruit. It is the cusp on top of it that's edible. Then it has berries that's edible, and the leaves themselves are edible too. So you have 4 things that you could eat from caper bush. Splav. So says the Gemara, the not in shiadata the pircha. People planted for the actual fruit, which is if you're not utnan, and we learned the Mishnah al minen nisfa on the caper bush, al ha'alin, balat marot, on the berries and on the leaves, you say bore periadama. And on the if you're not on kafrisin, on the actual fruit and the cost, the cover on top of them, you say bore periaetz. So you see that the cost, the cover, even though that you don't do it because of that, or the berries, that the tree is not planted because of the berries, or the leaves, it's not the fruit. The berries are the berries. It's not the fruit. The leaves are the leaves, not the fruit. And yet you make a bore peri adama on it. So how in the world are you telling me that Korah, which is hearts of palm, you have to say shakol? Why can't you just say bore peri adama on that, even though that's not the main reason that they planted? That's the question of the Gemara, which is now going to segue into a fascinating discussion about Slav, which we're going to see B'ezrat Hashem in the days to come.